What's up, guys? John O'Neill here with Kyle Driscoll. Today we're going to be talking about the hip hinge. So when we refer to a hinge in a weight room setting, we automatically think of deadlifts, RDLs, stuff like that. That's essentially just saying that the movement, the primary action is a hip hinge. A hip hinge is essentially just a disassociation from lumbar flexion and hip flexion. So as we go into hip flexion, can we maintain a neutral lumbar position? So do we go into hip flexion and lumbar flexion simultaneously, or can we maintain the separation or distinction between the two? We're going to see a hip hinge all throughout sports. So whether it's you load up to jump, change direction in a cut, or you're on a mound, or you're hitting, whatever it is, when you're doing a row, a standing cable row, do you do this as you set up, or can you do this? When you're doing any kind of landmine press, can you maintain this position, or do you go like this? So it's really important that all of our athletes are able to hip hinge, not just for the sake of a deadlift or deadlift variations, but so they can perform in all their athletic activities. If you watch a youth athlete, run, jump, change directions, they automatically kind of lose position in the middle of their body. Our goal is to teach enough about the position and put enough strength in the position so they can maintain posture as they go to change directions, as they go to jump, as they go to throw, hit, etc. Instead of going over how to coach a deadlift, etc., what we're going to do is go over 6 main ways that we can coach a hinge in a weight room. So if somebody can't hip hinge, what do we do? All 6 of these are going to be standing, so you can coach a hip hinge on the ground as a starting position. So whether it's a quadruped rock back, something in half kneeling where they essentially are disassociating hip flexion from lumbar flexion, all of these are going to be things that you're going to see on the floor here as a way, if somebody's trying to learn how to deadlift, you take them away from the deadlift, you put them in this with the goal of bringing them back to the deadlift. So the first one is just going to be a PVC hip hinge. So the PVC is going to lock somebody's spine in so they can't move it as they go into hip flexion. So Kyle's going to set up. Good, his head is going to touch it. His upper back's going to touch it. His tailbone's going to touch it. So all 3 of those points. And then from there, soft knees, and he's just going to push his hips back into the ring. Come back up. And he's kind of setting up for deadlift here. Don't let your knees flex more than they start. So soft knees and then just keep it there. So this should feel like he's loading up his hamstrings like a bow and arrow. Come back up and go one more so they see it. Awesome. So Kyle's doing a really good job of keeping a neutral spine position. If somebody can't do this, you're going to see them just round their back into, or their lumbar spine into the bottom of this. They're going to lose tailbone position. They're going to cheat by taking their head off. This would be one option of a beginner variation. There's going to be 5 more we go over. Our goal isn't to run through all of them. Our goal is to pick the right one that works for the athlete or the client in the moment to allow us to take them back to whatever primary movement they're working on. The second one we're going to do, and we can do this with the PVC pipe as well, but we're just going to separate these. Kyle's going to step into this band over here. So obviously we have a lot of bands set up right now. It's just for the idea of getting these all on the camera. But he's going to set up, and this is going to be a band-assisted hip hinge. So there's no tactile feedback on his spine. However, we're going to coach him to maintain a neutral spine while allowing the band to pull him into hip flexion. And then he's going to drive through. It's going to be like resisted hip extension. As this gets easier, he's going to step forward, make this a little harder. Good. And good, you can step out here. So same mechanics here, soft knees, hip flexion, no lumbar flexion. Next thing we're going to do, and we could do that with a stick on our back as well. Next thing we're going to do, really similar. We're going to use the same post here, and we're just going to work on hinging into the wall. So he's actually going to use his hands as a counterbalance so he can feel himself maintaining a good foot position, shifting his weight back from midfoot towards his heel, not coming off his toes though, just shifting pressures. Hips go back, hands go forward, and let's start him right next to the pole. Good. Soft knees, hands forward, hips back. Awesome, really easy, right?
Yep.
Cool, step forward a couple inches, same thing. And as a coach, we're gonna do this a couple reps at a time. All of a sudden that becomes harder, right?
Yep.
And now let's step forward like another 2 inches, go ahead. And awesome, so we're a little outside his range right now, but our goal is to progress that as far away as we can and allow him to learn the movement without any tactile feedback and eventually load it either with weight or with velocity or speed. Next thing we're gonna do, that's a band assisted, so we covered with a stick or a pole, band assisted, a wall assisted. It's going to be a band resisted. So this band is actually going to go around a pole and behind him. And what he's going to do is he's going to press it forward, which is going to shift his upper body back, and it's going to force everything to go back towards his heels. So step forward a tiny bit. Good. And so this should feel relatively challenging to hold this position. Turn your palms towards each other. Awesome. Soft knees. And now go with the band, but keep your hands out in front. It's a little harder than it looks. Awesome. Come back up. Go again. And bring your hands down with you on the way down. That way your hands stay right in front of your shoulders. Awesome. Good. Come back down. That band might be a little tough, especially if someone is trying to learn how to hinge. But that's the idea, trying to reach away from the band. Let's take that band off. So this is going to be band resisted again, but it's going to be more similar to the one where you're trying to hinge towards the wall. So you can obviously do this towards the wall. We're just going to do this in open space. Soft knees. Good. And now sit your hips away from your hands. Let your hands come down. Awesome. Come back. Let your hands come down a little more. Cool. Cool. So right now he's just learning a hinge by giving some pressure going forward, which is going to drive his upper body back and allow his rib cage to stay over his pelvis versus trying to arch up as he does it. So he's doing this, and then he's going into hip flexion. Next one, it's going to be a little more similar to a loaded variation. We're progressing up from no load to band assist to band resist to a pull through, and eventually we're going to get to a kettlebell. But this next one is going to be a pull through. We can do this with a band. We'll also load this for reps with a cable, but for now we're just going to use the band to help learn it. So he's going to hold this band right between his legs, trying to keep his hands as high up as possible, not down here, as high up as possible, obviously without getting in the way. From there, it's just going to be soft knees and allow the band to kind of feed his hands behind his body. Step forward a little more, and now feed your hands behind you like you're trying to hike a football to the quarterback. Awesome. You don't have to go quite as deep with your shoulders. So we're looking for shoulders just to get to around hip level, not below. Awesome. Go one more. Cool. So that band is essentially eccentrically loading his hamstrings in order for him to go into concentric hip extension. Last one we're going to cover is just going to be an isometric hold with the deadlift. So one really easy tool, let's say you're coaching a kettlebell deadlift and somebody has the starting position, but they can't do the whole movement while maintaining a neutral spine. Just teach a position that's not the exact bottom position. So the exact bottom position is obviously unloaded. Teach a position that's loaded, but is still static. So what I'm gonna have you do is set up, if you guys have already watched the kettlebell deadlift or the deadlift video, set up in an exact perfect position. So horns line up in the middle of the foot, feet are shoulder width, slightly out-toed. From here, he's just gonna sit away from his hands. Awesome, he drops his hands. So he's in a really good starting position. Can you feel your hamstrings?
Yep.
Awesome, so you should be able to feel your hamstrings in this bottom position. And then from there, instead of trying to drive his hips into hip extension, all he's gonna do is try to feel his hamstrings and get the bell like 1 inch off the floor, 2 inches off the floor and hold. Good, come back down. Good, the key here is gonna be you should feel the pushing action with your feet. You shouldn't feel a pulling action with your upper body. So get set up. And I want you to show just a really good example, just a push. So every joint goes slightly, you go slightly into knee extension, slightly into hip extension, slightly into just pushing into the floor. Bell comes just off the ground. I'm gonna have him show an example where he pulls the bell off the ground. So what he's gonna do is he's essentially just gonna go into thoracic and lumbar extension to get this weight off the floor. Go ahead. Good, so that's gonna be a really common error. Come back down. The opposite of that would be, you don't have to hold the bell just so you don't get hurt. But
I won't get hurt, John.
You won't get hurt? No. All right, cool. Set up in a good position. So we assume position is good. He's going to essentially just give up his lumbar spine as he goes. Cool. And that's somebody who took the tension that was in their hamstrings and just placed it in their spine. So let's show a good example just to wrap this up. Good. So feels hamstrings. Good. Gets his breath. Pushes. Every joint goes slightly into extension outside of his lumbar spine, which just stays totally still. That's it for today on Hinge teaching tools. This is stuff you're gonna see on the floor. This is stuff that you're gonna need to use as a coach if you're trying to coach a deadlift or a movement that requires a hinge and the person can hinge. Your goal isn't to pick all 6 or 7 that we just went over. Your goal is to pick the right one at the right time for the right person. So make sure you're familiar with all of these, whether it's PVC pipe, band assist, hinge to a wall, band resist with it around something, band resist with it around your body, a pull through, and an isometric deadlift.